Welcome back to Hot Stoxx. In the global crackdown on smoking, British American Tobacco remains a defensive counter. The company embarked on aggressive share buybacks recently.
British American Tobacco market cap almost 700 billion. Largest stock on the JSE, but not on the index because it's inward listed and there's all sorts of issues there with Saab and Co. Price earnings 17.8, dividend yield 3.9. Paolo, a stock that's typically a good dividend payer. Now 3.9 is not shabby, but really the share price has just been running, which has been pulling that down. Probably early this year, you had a dividend yield of just over 4.5. I suppose that's a bit of, your success hampers you a bit.
Yeah, well, I guess it's exactly right. It's going to drive down the dividend yield. But from a global point of view, and a purchaser in the UK, for example, that's still a very attractive dividend yield relative to, let's say, a US long bond that's going to give you 1.9%.
Or money in the bank, which is going to give you
0.2. Yeah. So it's attractive from that point of view, but British American Tobacco obviously is not without its headwinds going forward.
Headwinds being, more than anything, legislation, clampdown on smoking. We've seen it in North America, Western Europe, we're seeing it in South Africa. Illegal cigarettes.
Yeah, so illegal cigarettes are a big thing in the industry. I mean, there's a big market for that. Then, as you mentioned, there's the health issues that are being played out very much so in the Western world, of course, maybe less so in the emerging market, but that's where their growth is. The other side, of course, is they're just a sitting duck for taxes revenues. So this is a headwind they will find. It's an easy place to tax. So
especially when governments need revenue.
Yeah, and so it's quite difficult to grow your turnover line under those conditions. In addition, you can't really advertise, so you're kind of caught in this space. I mean, some of that's a plus because you can't advertise neither can new entrants, so they can't get market share on you. It's a two-edged sword, but it's a defensive company, but not without these headwinds as we discussed, and some of them are meaningful, of course.
Chris, I mentioned in the intro that the company's really embarked on a very, very aggressive share buyback in the 6 months to end June 2011. 135 million shares at a cost of £335 million. Why? It's not like they needed the cash. Are they trying to create an artificial demand for their shares?
No, I don't think so. It's a case, I think, more that it's an industry you don't have to put an awful lot of money back into. When you create the thing, it's not like there's a small barrier to entry, but the machinery that's required to actually make cigarettes is not fantastic. They've got this huge geographical footprint, better than any of the competitors all around the world. But it's just they have to give the money back. They've got to do something with the money.
They can't advertise.
Yeah, can't advertise. As Paolo said, it's interesting that we're now looking at the possibility of having a ban on alcohol advertising in South Africa. That'd be the best thing that would ever happen to SAB. They could close down their whole marketing. I'm just kidding. That was a joke.
No, but it entrenches the incumbent, as Paolo says, because your new entrants can't advertise. Yeah. It kind of entrenches the status quo as it is and saves them a marketing department.
When Ralph Edmondson gave a presentation back in, I think it was March, we asked him, I said, look, well, what's your market share? He said, about 86%. I said, what was it 10 years ago? About 86%. So nothing has changed, because if you can't advertise, then you, as a new competitor, you can't make any headway against the entrenched competitor.
Paolo mentioned some of the headwinds. Certainly tax is one of them, and certainly that's a place governments are going to go. They're desperate for revenue. Sins are easy ones: alcohol, gambling, and of course tobacco at the same time. The legislative impact, which has been marked in North America, Western Europe, we're seeing it coming into South Africa quite aggressively. This is surely going to, over time, and next maybe decades, it's going to grow globally. I think it was a Citibank report earlier in the year that said smoking will be gone by 2050. Is that even slightly likely, or is it just we start smoking in the pavements?
Well, yeah, exactly. I mean, if you think, I don't know if you ever saw a movie called Thank You for Smoking, and you look at you look at the kind of people that the smoking industry attracts. I mean, their ability to innovate, to get round legislation, to actually duck and dive. It's quite incredible. Still working within the rules. But, as Paolo alluded to, one of the biggest problems for governments around the world is smuggling. Now, if you don't take care of smuggling, then it's going to kill the industry, and it's going to kill the tax revenue.
The tax base.
So that's a problem. But there is a positive that comes out of excise increases. It means that companies like BAT, every year when the excise increase comes through, it just increases their revenue, because people they just take it. They accept it.
And they add a little bit. Government puts a rand on
Yep.
British American Tobacco, makes it a rand 10. I just blame government. They get a free ride there almost.
Provided the economy isn't so bad that people start giving up altogether. It just means they downtrade. You know, they'll go from a premium brand to what they call a drive brand, that type of thing. And the dynamics within the industry change a little bit. But at the end of the day, you know, it's a marvelously simple formula for actually making money.
Gentlemen, you could talk BAT all night. I need to know if you think it's smoking hot or not, Chris.
Oh no, this is a very hot one. Again, we've got this
Smoking hot.
smoking hot. Yeah, no, we like it. Yeah.
Okay. Paolo, how about you?
Yeah, I would also say it's hot. Not as hot as the other two, simply because I think the price has gone the other direction. So it's certainly core to our portfolios, but at the moment we'd be just relaxing on it a bit.
Simon Brown, are you puffing all the way to the bank because you're a fan of BAT's product and the share?
Yeah, a fan, I suppose we could call it a fan. I like it. I like British American Tobacco. I think it's expensive, 17, a PE of almost 18. It's certainly pricey. It's had a very strong move, but it's still going to pay you almost 4% dividend yield. There are some headwinds coming forward, but you know, as a defensive play, people are going to typically be smokers, and yes, they might shop down and the like, and governments might tax them more, but certainly I like it, and I think it's got a space. Unless you've got ethical issues, some folks say, nope, don't want to be involved in it. For me, I need to get some revenue back from all that money I spend on cigarettes, so I like it. It's hot.
Spoken like a true smoker. Chris, tell us what your hot stock pick is for tonight.
Well, I thought about Billiton, but then I thought, oh, you know, I've got to have a different stock. But something along the same lines, Anglo-American. Not quite as cheap as Billiton, a PE slightly higher. What I like about Anglo is I think they got a real skrig a couple of years ago. You know, when, first of all, they had that big decline in earnings, and then they passed the dividend, and then Xstrata came in and had the temerity to try and take them out. I think what they've done is...
Temerity being the word.
Yeah. I think what it's done is refocused them. And it's a bit like what happened with Standard Bank and Nedbank 10, 12 years ago. It really, I think, has fired them up. I think Cynthia Carroll, to me, is a different person to what she was even a couple of years ago. And you go to the presentations now, and you really get the impression that they are they're really, really serious about first of all, not selling out, not being taken over, and really trying to become the world's best miner. Look, I think they've got some ways to go with Billiton being up there in the forefront. But nevertheless, I think there's huge potential, and I think we're only in the early stages yet.
And they've proved it in some cases. Kumba Iron Ore, which is a subsidiary effectively. Anglo-Plat perhaps got a bit of a way to go still, certainly getting better. Anglo-Plat was always the weaker in terms of cost between them and Implat, but getting there, moving in that right direction.
Yes, and getting out of gold. You know, so they've realigned their portfolios, I think, very, very nicely. So look, we like Anglo.
Paolo, I think you alluded to the fact that you're also going to be staying with Resources Counter. What's your hot stock pick?
Yeah, so mine tonight would be Billiton.
Ah, no surprises.
I think we like the fact that they play in the lower cost commodities, so they're very efficient. The cash flow is strong, and I think the latest acquisition we think's in the right space. And over and above that, I don't think that story, the acquisition story, is over just yet either. So I think they can still lift the gearing to make further acquisitions. So we're quite excited about that, which we would consider a very well-run company.
Yeah, I mean, they're basically buying out of their cash pile. They're at 40-odd billion. A question, Billiton, for the private client out there who can't go and buy a massive portfolio, is Billiton almost, you buy Billiton and you can say, I've got Resources covered. One stock, I mean, you could buy the Resi ETF, but Billiton almost does it to you and perhaps does it better?
Yeah, you could argue that actually. You could just buy Billiton as your anchor holding in that space, and maybe touch a bit on Sasol or Gilmour and Exxaro or something like that.
To get a bit of energy or something.
Yeah, but by and large, as you say, you could achieve it with Anglos as well. Of course, you could get those two companies give you this quite large diversification.
And Simon, how do you feel about Anglo? That was Chris's stock pick.
I like Anglo. If I had to pick, I'd pick Billiton because I own it and I don't own Anglo. Yeah, 10 years ago it was easy, it was Billiton. 5 years ago it was easy, it was Billiton. I think it's now a lot closer as to which it is. Chris is right. Anglo's a different company than when Cynthia Carroll took over. She's really shaking it up. I like the fact that they got rid of the gold. I think it's tough to choose. If I had to, I'd probably go with Billiton. It's slightly cheaper in PE.
Fantastic.